And it must be because, I mean, communism, I think, must appeal to people with incomplete childhood issues. I mean, it must, because to have an all-powerful authority over you that provides for you and tells you what to do and encapsulates you in safety and security and control, well, that is the world of babyhood and toddlerhood and sort of very early childhood. And I wonder, it's just, thinking off the cuff, but I wonder how much of people's thirst for, whether it's resource-based economy, robot mommies, or the state that's going to take care of you forever and tell you what to do, whether people simply have a yearning for the kind of benevolent dictatorship of early childhood that your parents are supposed to provide, and whether that is hooked into by the state that says, you never really have to grow up. You never really have to be responsible for your own decisions. We'll tell you what to work at. We'll tell you what to eat. We'll tell you where to live and so on. And people just I don't think it's natural to want to give up free will when you're mature, but it seems to be so tempting for people to abandon responsibility for the sake of security, knowing as they do that they're going to end up with neither.
I think there's a lot to do with that with government schools, which is when we're taught the model of democracy, we're basically taught, imagine that you're an absolute dictator and how you would envision your country being in every aspect, from abortion to taxes to war to housing, and then vote your way accordingly. So we are taught at a very early age, elementary school, high school, I don't know, it depends on the person, to think of that as the basis of your approach to society. You have to envision yourself as in complete control, and then you argue with me and we argue, and then we have coalitions and we vote. But that is the basis of democracy as it's taught in school. And I don't think it's that much of a leap to go from there to accepting someone else to be that dictator, because that, again, is well, that's not contradicting anything. That's how I was raised.
And if the state, as we know, is force, and parents put their children into government schools, then it's very hard for those children to say, well, the government is force and you put me in a coercive environment.
Yes.
I think that bonding with the schools is, in a sense, a proxy for bonding with the parents. And to look at your parents and say, wait, this is an agency of coercion and you kind of put me into its tender care to be propagandized. I mean, what are you kidding? And it's like, well, what are the parents going to say? Well, we had to, or the money is stolen from us anyway. It's like, but you told me not to lie. The whole time when I was a kid, you told me, don't use force to get what you want. Don't push, don't hit, don't steal, don't thump, and don't lie. And then you put me in this environment that's funded by coercion that's telling me lies. It's like, I think it becomes like, I'm just going to bond with the state because it's easier than questioning everything else.
And one of the things I've been very gratified to see in very recent years is, as I talk to several conservatives, I always make the point that government schools are literally prisons for children. And a few years ago, they would laugh in my face because, how can you say that? We all do it. We all send our kids to school. But in recent years, and I don't know what was the turning point, I think as much more of the evangelism of progressivism at a younger and younger age is, and the stories are being reported in social media, and people are like, wait a minute, you don't need to tell 5-year-olds that they can become a girl tomorrow. At that age, they don't have the capacity to understand things like that. I've had more and more conservatives tell me, yeah, I agree with you. So I think that is very, very healthy, that realization. It's not about reforming the government schools and having them teach conservative propaganda. It's like, wait a minute, this is not a salvageable system, and these children are prisoners, and they're being taught to obey from kindergarten.
Well, I agree with you with one caveat that I think you're insulting prisons, because a prisoner who's in a prison, let's say that you're innocent, well, you know that you've been treated unjustly and you're not being propagandized 8 hours a day. You're just being caged, and you know you're being caged. You know that you're in a situation of coercion, whereas in the schools, all of that's covered up, right? The source of the funding is covered up. The control that the unions have is covered up. The ideological control is all presented as education. At least in the prison, they'll cage your body, but your mind is relatively free. But you are a little bit more physically free in the schools, but your mind is more enslaved than I think any prisoners could be.
And you're given a reason why you're sent to prison, as opposed to simply because you happen to be born. So that's another argument.
Prison is open punishment, whereas the school pretends to be educational. So that would be my only too nice on the prison thing. But yeah, it is rough, and it is one of these things that, they're making people crazy faster than we can make them sane, because so many people, pouring into government schools every day, little kids being indoctrinated up the yin yang, and it takes a certain amount of grit and steel and maybe even just base raw intelligence to pull yourself out of that pit. And this is why it is really hard to turn the system around, because it's manufacturing things. It's manufacturing confused people faster than we can make them unconfused.